Good evening, everyone. Happy Sunday to all of you. My name is William Hemsworth. Welcome back to the Bible Catholic channel. Wow, just thought I'd come and do this impromptu stream with you all today to talk about my man Polycarp. Man, what a great saint. But before I do that, I got some news for you. So a lot of you have been asking, when are you going to hear about the diaconate? I heard yesterday. First class is August, and God willing, please pray for me, be ordained in 4 years. All right. So, God willing. All right. So, close your eyes for a moment. Imagine it's the year 155 AD. An elderly bishop stands before a roaring crowd in the Roman arena, and the governor gives him one final chance. He says, "Swear by the fortune of Caesar. Curse Christ, and you will live." The old bishop refuses. And he utters words that Christians have remembered for nearly 2,000 years. This is what he said. Let me pull it on the screen here. 86 years I have served him, and he has done me no wrong. How can I blaspheme my king who saved me? That's Saint Polycarp. And Saint Polycarp is my patron saint. So let's learn a little bit about Saint Polycarp really quick. He was the Bishop of Smyrna. He was taught by Saint John, and Saint Irenaeus talks about this. Saint Irenaeus knew Polycarp personally, and he wrote that Bishop Polycarp was instructed by Saint John and by others who had seen the Lord, and that's in his work against heresies. And so he represents this vital link between the apostles and the church of the 2nd century. St. Polycarp served as a bishop in Smyrna for many years. He was known for, one moment here. My fault, excuse me. He was known for his holiness, his humility, and deep love for the faithful, and he urged Christians to remain faithful to the gospel and to live lives of prayer, virtue, and charity. And he has one writing that has survived today, and it's his letter to the Philippians. He wrote it sometime between 110 and 135. Check it out. It's not very long, but it's some good stuff in there. It's filled with scripture and offers powerful teachings on faith, hope, love, perseverance. And he was a martyr. So during the persecution under Emperor Marcus Aurelius, Polycarp was arrested and urged to renounce Christ. He refused. Like I said, the quote I read you just a moment ago, 86 years have I served him, and he has done me no wrong. How can I blaspheme my king who saved me? And he's a lasting witness. St. Polycarp's life, writings, and martyrdom inspire Christians to this day. And my friends, I'm one of those. He's a shining example of faith, courage, and love for Christ. All right. So give me one moment. All right. So let's get back to me for a moment. I'm having some technical difficulties, my friends. There we go. We are back. Man, technology's great, and hope you like that picture of my friend Lisa Marie Nicole. Check out her music. Well, yeah, all right. St. Polycarp, my apologies. He wasn't just another bishop. According to the earliest Christian resources, like I said a moment ago, he was taught by St. John. So think about that. When Polycarp preached, when he wrote, when he explained scripture, he wasn't passing along traditions that had developed centuries later. He was teaching what he had received from those who walked with Jesus. And so today we're going to investigate a very interesting question. Okay. We're going to talk about the Deuterocanon and Polycarp because it comes up with some very interesting questions. All right. In chapter 10 of his letter, Polycarp writes, "When you can do good, defer it not, because almsgiving delivers from death." Now, at first, there's nothing unusual here, but this was a very interesting to me discovery when I was investigating the Catholic Church, because Saint Polycarp was quoting the Deuterocanonical Book of Tobit. And I'm reading this in my Logos Bible software several years ago, and I'm like, oh my gosh. I click on the footnote. I'm like, Tobit? What's Tobit? Never heard of Tobit. Because, Protestant Bible, 66 books, Protestants missing 7 of them. Polycarp, the great Saint Polycarp, quoted Tobit as scripture. I mean, this is huge. This is huge. So Polycarp said, this is what he wrote, "And when you can do good, defer it not, because almsgiving delivers from death." This is Tobit chapter 4, verse 10. And Tobit chapter 12, verse 9 says, "For almsgiving delivers from death and purges away every sin." So this is this great similarity here. This isn't just some similarity of thought. This is strikingly close in wording. And it raises this question. Was Polycarp intentionally quoting Tobit, or was there something else going on? Now, when we talk about Tobit, sorry, guys, my script is going all bonkers here. You gotta love technology. Nothing like doing live shows. All right. Now, how does one quotation prove Polycarp had a complete canon list to a list identical to our Bible? Now, it doesn't. And no Catholic claims that it does. But what it does prove something important. It proves that Polycarp treated Tobit as an authoritative source for Christian instruction. He quoted it naturally, just as he quoted other biblical books. Now, this completely undermines the claim that the early church universally rejected the Deuterocanonical books. Now, in fact, Polycarp isn't alone. St. Clement of Rome alludes to wisdom. St. Irenaeus quotes Baruch. St. Cyprian cites Tobit, just like St. Polycarp did. And the Didache, the earliest catechism that we have, cites the Book of Sirach. And just, I want to throw something in there, has nothing to do with the church fathers, but John Calvin saw Baruch as scripture. So, as we move through the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th centuries, this evidence continues to accumulate. When the regional councils of Hippo in 393 and Carthage in 397 recognized the canon of scripture, they affirmed the same Old Testament that us as Catholics use today. So the Council of Trent didn't invent the canon. The Council of Trent did not insert other books into the Bible. It reaffirmed the canon that had been received and used throughout the life of the church in response to the challenges of the Protestant Reformation. Now, some might ask, if Polycarp accepted Tobit, why didn't he simply list every biblical book? I mean, that's fair. But it's really a simple question. Remember, this is early in the 2nd century. Christian writers were not attempting to write lists of the inspired books. They were writing letters, sermons, and other theological works. We determine what books they regarded as scripture by examining how they used them. And in this case, Polycarp used them as scripture. When an early bishop repeatedly quotes or alludes to a book while teaching the faith, that evidence deserves serious consideration. Now, I want to get to a couple more objections here that sometimes come up. Sorry, scrolling through my notes. I made a lot of notes here. Like I said, my computer is just not liking me today. All right, here we go. All right, so one objection someone may say, Polycarp never says it is written or explicitly calls Tobit scripture. True, but we need to notice something important. Polycarp rarely introduces Old Testament quotations with formal formulas at all. His style is just to simply weave biblical language naturally into his writing. The real question isn't whether he used a particular introductory phrase. The question is whether he considered Tobit authoritative enough to use it while instructing the church. And the evidence suggests that he did. Now, one of the most common objections is this. Some argue that Polycarp wasn't quoting Tobit at all. Instead, they say he was simply repeating a well known Jewish proverb. The problem is that when we have no evidence that such a proverb existed outside of Tobit. When historians examine ancient literature, they normally assume that when two passages contain distinctive wording, the later writer is drawing from the earlier source, unless there's evidence of another tradition. Without evidence for an independent proverb, the simplest explanation remains that Polycarp was quoting the Book of Tobit. Another objection is that the church fathers occasionally quoted pagan philosophers or even works like First Clement or the Shepherd of Hermas. And true. Quoting a book does not automatically make it scripture, and us as Catholics agree. But that's not our argument. Our argument is cumulative. Polycarp isn't the only Christian who uses Tobit. As I said a few moments ago, Clement of Rome uses wisdom. Irenaeus quotes Baruch. St. Cyprian repeatedly cites Tobit. And even Origen included the Deuterocanon as well. Augustine explicitly accepted them as scripture. St. Athanasius, he distinguishes between the books, but he says that the Deuterocanonical writings are good for instruction. And so when you place Polycarp into that larger historical pattern, the evidence becomes much stronger. Some people point to St. Jerome, the translator of the Latin Vulgate, arguing that he rejected the Deuterocanonical books. Jerome certainly expressed reservations because he preferred the Hebrew canon. But here's what often gets left out. Jerome still translated the Deuterocanonical books. He included them in the Vulgate. He quoted them throughout his later writings. Most importantly, Jerome submitted to the judgment of the church regarding the canon. One church father's personal opinion is very interesting. The consensus of the church is what ultimately settled the matter. One of the biggest objections says that it is the Jews. The Jews rejected the Deuterocanonical books. Okay, but which Jews? The Old Testament, used throughout much of the Greek-speaking Jewish world, was the Septuagint. It contained the Deuterocanonical books. The New Testament writers frequently quote from the Septuagint rather than the later Hebrew Masoretic tradition. The Jewish canon wasn't universally settled during the lifetime of Jesus. Christians inherited the scriptures that had already been widely used in the apostolic age. Now, finally, someone might say, even if Polycarp quoted Tobit, one church father doesn't prove the Catholic canon. Completely agree. Polycarp alone doesn't settle the issue. Neither does Clement, neither does Irenaeus. Historical conclusions are rarely based on one witness. They're based on a lot of evidence, cumulative evidence. And when we examine the earliest Christians as a whole, we consistently find the Deuterocanonical books being read, quoted, preached from, and eventually affirmed by the universal church. And Polycarp is one important piece of that historical puzzle. I mean, not the entire puzzle, but an important piece. All right. Polycarp stands as one of the strongest historical witness to apostolic Christianity. He learned from the apostles. He defended the faith. He died a martyr rather than deny Christ. And in his surviving writings, we find evidence that he knew and used the Deuterocanonical Book of Tobit as scripture. So the closer we look at the earliest Christians, the more we discover that the Catholic understanding of the Old Testament wasn't invented centuries later. It reflects a tradition that reaches back to the generation immediately after the apostles. So, friends, I want to leave you with one question today. Just one question. Oh, man. I had a whole closing paragraph. Man, my computer is going ape today. So, whether you're Catholic, Protestant, or just curious about Christian history, I hope you examine the evidence for yourself. If a man taught by the Apostle John knew and used Tobit, shouldn't that at least make us pause before saying the Deuterocanonical books were late Catholic additions? History deserves to be heard on its own terms. The more I study the earliest tradition, the earliest Christians, the more I find that they look remarkably Catholic. So, my question is this: if these books were used way back in the 2nd century, they were quoted in the New Testament, what makes people think that the Catholic Church removed books from the Bible or added books to the Bible? Excuse me. What makes people think that the Catholic Church added those books to the Bible when the earliest Christians quoted them as scripture? All right. That's the show for today. Join me back on Wednesday. We're going to talk to a scholar, a Bishop Fulton Sheen scholar, and talk about his canonization coming up. And on Saturday, going to talk to Bill Snyder and Dr. Ann DeSantis about evangelism. God bless you all. Have a great day. And sorry for all the technical flubs.